The people who actually change their lives almost never announce it. They pay for the announcement with the change itself, nearly every time. So here's what silence really does while you rebuild: what it protects, what it costs you, and the exact point where it stops protecting anything and starts hiding you. Because we live in a culture that treats the announcement as the proof. The post, the caption, the update at dinner, the little green banner. Say it out loud and people nod like something already happened. Stay quiet and everyone assumes nothing's going on. That assumption is the safest thing that will ever happen to you. I want you to hold one picture while we go. A woman, 34, laid off in Raleigh in a round that took 11 people off her floor on a Tuesday morning. She never turned the banner on. She never wrote the post. Her name is Tessa, and for 4 months the only ones who knew what she was building were her and the library, which kept emailing her about an overdue copy of Bird by Bird. We'll come back to her, but stay with me, because the thing most people get wrong here isn't the silence. It's what the silence is actually protecting. Start with what happens in the first 10 seconds of telling someone. There's a line of work in behavioral psychology, most of it running through a psychologist named Peter Gollwitzer, that looked at what happens when people say a goal out loud to somebody whose opinion matters to them. Not write it down. Say it to a face. Gollwitzer called what follows symbolic self-completion, and the plain version goes like this. Your sense of being the person who does the thing can be fed by symbols of that person, not only by the doing. A statement is a symbol. So is a title, a piece of equipment, a very specific pair of shoes. Here's the part that stings. The people who announced their intention and got acknowledged for it did less of the real work afterward than the ones who stayed quiet. They felt further along. They were further behind. And that's because the acknowledgement shows up instantly, and the results don't. You told your cousin you're going back to school and you watched her face change. Approval. Right there. Warm, free, delivered in under a second. The degree is 4 years out. Your nervous system isn't reading a calendar. It's keeping a ledger, and the ledger just got paid. So you spend the fuel standing at the door, and it matters enormously who you're standing in front of. The effect showed up when the listener's opinion carried real weight. A mentor, a parent, the friend whose respect you genuinely miss. Tell a stranger on a plane and basically nothing happens. Tell the one person whose nod you've been quietly collecting since you were a kid, and you can feel the goal settle into place, finished, before a single hour of work exists behind it. The tells are easy to spot once you know them. The membership bought and the caption posted the same afternoon. The book that's been described out loud maybe 40 times and drafted twice. The plan that gets a little better every time you explain it and never once gets started. It doesn't feel like spending, though. It feels like support, which is the cruel part. Laziness has nothing to do with it. You got prepaid. You collected the feeling of having become someone, weeks or months before the unglamorous, unwitnessed part where you actually become them. Tessa had the sentence drafted. It sat in her notes app for 6 days, a clean, humble little paragraph about a hard season and an exciting new chapter. She deleted it on a Sunday. She said afterward it felt like setting down a glass she'd been holding at shoulder height without realizing her arm was shaking. That's the first mechanism. The second one is heavier. Being watched while you're competent is one thing. Being watched while you're mid-collapse is a completely different event in the body. And here's the thing almost nobody says out loud. The person most likely to hold you in place isn't someone who dislikes you. It's the person who's proudest of the version of you that's ending. They loved that version. They built their whole picture of you around it. Every time you talk, they hand it back to you. The running joke about your job, the thing you're known for, the role you've played at family dinners since you were 19. They're remembering you, faithfully, the way they always have. And from the outside, being remembered accurately works a lot like being held still. And there's a physical layer under all of it. In behavioral psychology, it goes by social evaluative threat. The specific state you enter when something you care about is being judged by people whose opinion carries weight with you. Stress is the wrong word for it. Your body files this one under threat to standing, and standing, for a social animal, has always been a survival issue. Your working memory narrows. You get worse at the exact thinking you need most right then. Planning, weighing options, staying with a hard problem long enough to solve it. You become, temporarily, a less capable version of yourself. At the precise moment you needed the more capable one. There's a second cost stacked on top of that one. Under a watch, you stop building and start performing that you're building, and those are not the same activity. Building requires being visibly bad at something for a stretch. The first draft that embarrasses you, the first month at a skill where you're worse than a 14-year-old, the interview you fumble and then replay for a week. Performing means never letting anybody see the stage between who you were and who you're headed toward. So you drift toward tasks you look competent doing. You steer around the ones you'd have to be terrible at first, which are, without exception, the ones that would have changed something. Which is why just lean on everyone can quietly backfire during a rebuild. Then there's pity, which arrives dressed as kindness and never quite fits. Pity is a ranking. Somebody has to be up for somebody else to be down, and the second you're being handled gently, the ranking's already been made. You felt it land as a small drop in the chest, and you smiled anyway, and you said you're doing fine, and some part of you filed that person under people I can't be honest around for a while. None of this makes the people around you bad. It means a person in the middle of changing needs one room where nothing is being measured. Tessa's version of that room was her car in a grocery store parking lot, 40 minutes at a time, with the engine off. Quick thing before the middle part, and it's the part that matters most. If this is landing a little too accurately, subscribing genuinely helps it reach the people doing this right now in silence, and they're not exactly raising their hands to be found. Then stay. Because what comes next is where most quiet rebuilds actually die. The first month is clean. The silence feels like a decision you made, and there's something almost regal about it. Month 2, month 3, it stops feeling like a strategy and starts feeling like a room. Friendships thin out, and not from any fight. Nobody blocks anybody. It happens because you stopped playing the part you were cast in. Every relationship runs on roles, handed out years ago and never once discussed. You were the funny one, the one who always has a plan, the one who checks in first. You stop performing the role, and the other person doesn't get angry about it. They just drift. You've watched at least one of them go that way, which is quieter than a fight, and worse. And this is where the honest question has to come in, because I'd be doing you no favors otherwise. Some of you aren't protecting your progress. You're protecting the exit, and calling it privacy hurts less than calling it a backup plan. And if that one stung a little, that's usually a sign it landed close. That's the whole difference. And there's a pretty simple way to check. Quiet that's protecting something has work underneath it. You can point at the work. Hours, pages, applications, reps, saved money, something with a shape. Quiet that's hiding has a story underneath it instead. A story about what you'll say if it doesn't work out. You've rehearsed that story. You've refined it. If you can't point to the work, you're not rebuilding in private. You're negotiating with the option to quit. Somewhere in that stretch comes the urge to let it out, to tell somebody the whole thing, the layoff and the number in the account and how bad it's gotten. I'm not saying carry it alone, and I want to be clear about that. Therapy counts. Your one person counts. I mean the group chat, the half-friend at the party, the relative who asks in a certain tone. Because shame in the middle of a rebuild behaves like pressure. And pressure, in fairness to it, is what moves anything at all. Say it to the wrong person and they'll do the merciful thing. They'll tell you, it's fine, you did what you could, everybody's struggling right now. They mean it kindly, and I don't think there's a villain anywhere in that sentence. But the pressure drops to 0, and you go home lighter, and you do nothing for another 11 days. So the line falls somewhere else than speak versus stay silent. It falls on who? Talk to someone who's watching your work. Be careful with the ones who are only watching your mood. Here's what makes the private version work, mechanically. There's a finding in behavioral psychology that gets quoted less than it should. Herminia Ibarra, who studies how people change careers and identities, found that nobody reasons their way into a new self and then executes it. They try versions. She calls them provisional selves, small, unconvincing, half-committed drafts of a person you might become, tested in low-stakes places before you'd ever put your name on one. And a draft cannot survive an audience. Show someone the second draft, and they'll respond to it as a finished thing. Then you're defending a version of yourself you were still deciding about. Privacy is where a draft is allowed to be bad, which changes what this whole stretch even is. What looks from the outside like a disappearance is closer to an inventory. You've been going through every habit, every automatic yes, every relationship you have, holding each one up against a question you've never said out loud to anybody. Does this belong to who I'm becoming, or only to who I was? You're allowed to become someone without filing a progress report. The version of you that lasts is the one nobody supervised. So, 3 things, and the third one is the whole game. First, leave quietly. No announcement that you're stepping back from the group, the job, the city, the friendship. A stated exit is a request for attention wearing a coat, and it puts you on a stage at the exact moment you need the wings. Second, stop filing progress reports. When somebody asks what you're up to now, give the boring answer and let it be boring. Most people asking are locating themselves relative to you, usually without meaning anything cruel by it. You don't owe anyone your coordinates. Third, and behavioral psychology has been circling this one for decades, do the work on the days when skipping it would cost you nothing. There's no streak to protect, no applause, no post. Anyone can push through a hard week while people are watching. The rebuild is decided entirely by the ordinary Wednesdays when quitting would have been completely invisible. Now the twist, and you should be honest with yourself about this one. The first version of the motive is almost never noble. You pictured the moment they'd notice. You had the scene. The room, the faces, who says what. Everyone does. But what happens on the other side is stranger than the scene. You get there, and the moment doesn't play. Not because you rose above it, because the person who needed that moment doesn't exist anymore. You edited them out yourself, quietly, on some Wednesday you couldn't name now. That's what the silence was protecting the entire time. Not a secret. A version of you that was still too new to survive being described. Tessa's banner is still off. The reveal never got scheduled. At some point, she stopped thinking of it as a thing that required announcing at all. Somebody asked her at a wedding in April what she's doing now, and she said she's been sorting some stuff out, and then added the word logistics, which explains nothing and made her laugh in the car afterward. The library got its book back. Eventually. If you're in the middle of one of these right now, type the month you started. Just the month, nothing else. You'll see how many people are down there doing this quietly at the same time as you. And if you've been quiet for a while and nobody's checked, that isn't evidence you're invisible. It's just proof the room is finally empty enough to work in.